afternoon, everyone, and welcome back once again after the lunch break. We had Somit as well, and Mayank is here for the next panel discussion, and that's on automation pitfalls and how to prevent your business from being one of the 30 to 50% of automation implementation projects that fail. That's the topic, and I'll just give a brief about this topic. So, automation has been instrumental in reaping faster business outcomes across divisions in most organizations. This is mainly because it gives you the luxury of creating your own software bots to automate your desired business processes. The bots don't only help save long, tiring manual productivity hours, but also offer precision and accuracy to the mix. Organizations have eventually started working on the notion of automate or die in their business strategies. However, implementing a successful automation project might not be a cakewalk for many organizations. A recent survey reveals that more than 40% of RPA project fails to deliver output due to lack of right process selection, clear strategy, and responsibility. So this panel is designed to guide business leaders who are scaling their automation journey and are laying a roadmap for a successful enterprise-wide automation implementation. And the debate would cover the opportunity areas and pitfalls of the implementation across functions. So the panel has been joined by Mayank Bhargava. He's the CIO of Pramerica Life Insurance. And also we have Somit Kapoor, VP and Global Head Automation and Transformation, Wipro Limited. And I'll be the moderator. So going ahead, welcome, Javelin, on board, both of you. Thank you for being over here and right on time. And to start off with, I have a set of questions which has been sent by the attendees, and obviously the audience wants to know these questions and these topics they want to discuss. So that's why I'm putting across. And I'm filling in for Prashant. He is not able to make it today, and there was some emergency. That's why he's not present. Prashant was supposed to come, but so sorry. But I'm the least to go ahead with the technology terms, but still, we have the two experts over there. They'll be talking. I'll be just throwing the the questions to them. So there you go. The first topic to start off with is how to set the vision, a charter and roadmap to escape the pitfalls of automation projects. Anyone can go ahead with Mayank or Sumit.
All right, maybe I'll take a stab at it first. Thanks, Anupam, and thanks all our attendees who are joining in this particular session. See, I think automation is or the need or the desire to automate, I think is generally very strong. In any organization, this often becomes a very abused term. At times to kind of hide away the inefficiencies that might be existing in the process, or some of the the talent gaps that might be there because of which some of those issues are coming in, or generally sometimes where there could be a genuine need to automate. So there has to be a very clear mechanism, a strategy, a framework by which one determines what is required to be automated, in what sequence do we want to go ahead and get some of those things automated, and where do we bring in technology, where we rely on the human intelligence and the competence, and also determining where or what all things should not be automated, because otherwise it is considered that technology is the panacea, and within which one of the arrows available, or a silver bullet which is available, called automation. So just go ahead and automate everything. Like that's how it was to be done, or that's how, or if it was that simple, then some of the statistics that you just mentioned would not have been true. So clearly, the organizations do struggle with this particular subject, this particular technology. And with RPA coming in and becoming more accessible for the organizations with support from the various system integrators, the desire to actually automate anything and everything has never been stronger. So with this kind of a context, if one were to really pick out the elements that what actually needs to be automated, I think there is a need to have the business leaders along with the technology team to determine what really merits an automation, something which is simple, something which is repeatable, something which is very consistent, something that is definitely going to create gains and early gains, for people to gain confidence, to learn about the technology, become clear candidates for, doing the automation journey. As a part of the vision, also understanding or clearly calling out, clearly articulating it, for all the stakeholders. Not everything is meant to be automated, and staying true to that thought. Going for something that can be actually automated, but be also very clear that there are certain things that are not going to be automated. I think this kind of gives a broad contour within which you could define what your automation journey is going to look like, considering the overall vision, the charter, and the rest of the things that will need to be covered for moving things forward.
Somit, your call on that, your words.
I was thanking Mayank in terms of how he started and explained the entire piece. I think my experience is on the other side of the spectrum, where I advise clients into how we have seen things happening across different industries and companies. And one of the things that we start in terms of setting up a vision for automation is very simply really putting that fear of God in the front, saying what are the reasons why projects fail, and if you can cover those reasons, I think you have a right vision and a right strategy in place, and then you can obviously start improvising on top. And therefore, for me, the starting point for any company is really identify where I can go wrong. And I'll give you a few examples why automation projects have significantly failed in some of the very significantly large deployment companies. The biggest thing that we've seen in terms of the weightages also is that people fail to, as Mayank was referring to, they fail to understand and create a structure of how to identify what is the right process to automate. And very understandably also what is the process should not be targeted for automation. And therefore, a very strong governance and a advisory setup of people who are a combination of both technology and business to come together to be able to understand, are we doing the right thing? Are we picking a right process? Are we picking a right set of applications?
I think there's an internet glitch over there with him.
So we can't hear you.
So I think we missed a few lines. The network was bad.
Is it better now?
Yeah, it's better now. Just a few 20 minutes. Last 20 minutes. Sorry, 20 seconds. Sorry.
20 seconds.
Yeah.
What I was saying is the second component is more about the whole continuum of what people have been talking about. Where does the automation ownership lies? Is it the IT, the CIOs, or is it the business, the CEO? And we've seen different examples of this. Some companies you would see the CIO leading the charge. Some companies you would see the business leading the charge. And my recommendation here to the larger audience is it should not be one team versus the other. It has to be a combination, and therefore we need to have joint ownership of business and IT of managing this project, because RPA is not just plain simple an IT project implementation. Where typically most IT implementation projects you would have very structured guidelines of what you want to achieve. RPA is about automating fast, automating what is right in front of you, and then continue to improvise. Your bot is not going to be a 99.9% accurate bot on the day one of launch. And if we are clear on that, and we believe that it can be at least 80 to 85% accurate, and I can live with that for day one, but in the next 3 months I can make it 99% accurate, I think that is where the core ROI and the core principles of automation will lie. So have a very strong governance structure. And the third piece, is the whole change management piece, which I think a lot of companies fail to structure right in the start, which is about understanding what impact would automation have on my business. Most of the times I've seen people only getting worried about headcount release or HR management of talent and so on and so forth. But that's just one component of what change would bring in when you get into automation. You're going to be policy changes. There are going to be changes in the way you structure your even ID management processes. Because once a human was onboarded, you had a different ID management process versus a bot getting onboarding. There has to be a different way of how you onboard a bot. So that third, if you can cover these three things from a vision standpoint, I think most companies would start on a very solid framework and a structure which will lead to a lot of success in the coming years and months.
So you just were talking about the different processes that brings to our next question I had, that identifying the right process to automate. So how do we pick the right process for an effective automation project? So I'll go with Somit itself. You can start off with this, to how to identify the right processes on this.
Sure, sure. I think every company and every organization have kind of created their own structures of how they want to identify. But if you look at the broad principles of how that metric structure or that framework should look like, the first very important component is: are you able to really have enough data points for each of the processes that you want to really undergo, a high-level assessment whether they can be automated or should be automated or not? So do you have the right data collection, data measurement methodologies across those processes? Which you don't have, more likely or most likely you would have incomplete data to make the right decision for that process. Number one. Number two, once you do that, do you have the right documentation available? And when I say documentation, is it really in the tacit knowledge lying in the heads of the people who are working on that process, or do you have some documented process steps of how that process is managed? What are the kind of exceptions in that process? What are the approval processes, and so on and so forth, so that you have very clearly, you can take a decision whether this process can be or should be automated. Then the third component is the importance of that process in that larger scheme of that organization, which is about rating that process. Is it really, a customer success driven project? Is it really a critical project? Is it really a process which changes the way, my customers or my internal customers or even my finances are being managed, and so on and so forth. And the final component is, therefore drafting, studying those three components of data, process flows, and the importance of the project, trying to populate that into a simple matrix of saying, output towards what this automation will lead into. So the impact of automation for that process versus on the other axis, what is really the time taken to automate? Because there are going to be simple automation projects, they're going to be a little more complex and very complex projects. So what is the time taken to automate versus what is the the business impact? And then you create your strategy in terms of you want to pick up the low hanging fruit, which are processes which have high on impact and less on timelines, are the first one that you want to go after. Then there are going to be processes where you would need some bit of changes to happen prior to automation. May take 3 or 4 months for you to do that, so you put that into the middle bucket, and so on and so forth. And then it becomes much easier, for organizations to have a framework like this to, be able to manage these. And nowadays there are so many other tools available. The process mining tools we actually help you collect this data and make those decisions much faster. So even the choice of automation is becoming automated these days now.
Yeah, Mayank, your call on that.
Yeah, I think Sumit has very well articulated the key considerations that should go in for selecting any process that you would want to automate. I think from a business standpoint, maybe I think I'll probably just add on or maybe complement what Sumit just mentioned. The important aspect is to create a success and create an early success. Let people gain confidence that this works. This technology is actually going to help save those hours, reduce the errors, and actually is going to create value. So, considering all of those parameters, I think one of the elements that should be considered as a derived component is what is the business value that we would be able to derive once we are looking at automating any process. And that business value with respect to the overall effort. Now, there could be a process that one might select and say, it's going to drive immense business value, but it's going to take 12 months to, fully automate and be implemented. That's clearly a non-starter. So you want to pick up something which would be able to generate the highest amount of business value in the smallest amount of time. So I think as long as we are able to really identify or incorporate this in the overall the framework that Somit just spoke about, I think we will have the right pecking order or the right framework for selecting the processes that one should go after. For sure, not never pick up or avoid picking up, the processes which are fairly complicated, not very well documented, because then everything kind of gets blamed on the automation part that, because of which this is not working. But, the fact of the matter might be that that process would not have been working, and it would have just been working on hearsay or the colloquial knowledge available within the team. But if somebody were to kind of do it independently using the available documentation, even manually, it would not have worked. But the blame kind of gets shifted on the automation process, and that kind of creates a negative energy or creates a negative vibe around that whole automation, right? So avoid, that kind of a situation. Once you've got some success under the belt, then one could perhaps be a little more adventurous in picking up the subsequent processes or initiatives in this space.
Thank you, Mayank. Thank you so much. We have another question over here. Now we come to the identifying the backlog of automation. So how to be wise at scaling up the bots based on the requirements of the process? So we can go ahead with any of you on that.
Yeah, so maybe I'll kind of just share my thoughts. See, I understand this in two parts. One is whenever you will want to start off with the automation journey, there'll be 10 people bouncing upon you saying that this is the one that you want to kind of automate first. And then from a technology standpoint, one would or the PMO would say, okay, everybody's sent across their requirements, and before you could even start, you will find that there are some 50, 100 processes that people want to automate, right? And you would want to start off with 1, 2, maybe 5 processes initially, and everything else kind of becomes the backlog. Now, so managing this as a backlog of typical requirements, even in a agile methodology, one would really want to kind of fall back on the framework to see which of these processes actually are the right candidates that we can start off with. Once we have that success available, then either we incorporate our learnings in the framework and say, okay, now we can pick up some of these processes as well, or we continue on the same path. Okay, we would want to go and clear off those processes which are simple, which are easy to execute, highly repeatable, not really too much of a decision making that's required, and we can get them done. The second part, now you've kind of got your processes up and running. You've got a few of the bots which are working, and there's a huge amount of success. People are looking at if bandwidth of the bots is a problem, why don't we just scale up? Why don't we get more bots to do the task that is required to be done? So this is a little tricky part. Organizations at times have struggled with this scale up. Initial small pieces, it's all right. You experiment, you do small POCs, you take them to production, they work, everybody's happy. But the moment you kind of say, okay, let's make it 10x of what you've got, that's where the struggle comes in. And I think some of the points that Somit spoke about earlier, I think become very important on how do you bring in a governance around the management of these bots, because they are, like the regular workers that you've got, except that they'll be far more efficient. And at the same time, if there is any kind of a damage, they will be like a herd of mad elephants. They'll kind of trample over everything that you've got. A human at times might be able to identify some of that damage while it's happening, but a bot, if you not put across those right controls, or there is not really a right governance around, the scale up of those bots, can get you into a lot of trouble. So largely, the scale up actually needs to be managed through a very, very tight governance around the performance monitoring, the exception handling, any kind of error management that is happening, and continuously incorporating that either for the branched out human interventions, or making those changes in the bots and not really allowing the bots to take control of your destiny or your work. Otherwise, for the work being done by the bot, one might just get fired.
Sumit, would you like to add up?
Absolutely. I think Mike rightly pointed out on two things, and I'm going to build on top of that. The first one, on the scaling part, which Mike spoke about, having the right governance, specifically on the on a myth that people have in organizations, because in the previous question, I was trying to explain a concept called accuracy of bots. Automation is not about that I would go at a 99% accuracy or 100% accuracy on day one, because then it becomes a larger IT platform project. It's more about what can you capture much faster, and therefore then start improvising and growing from there. And therefore the growth of the bots also take that same concept, because if somebody tells me that I am 2 months in my journey of automation and my bots work 99.7% accurately, uh, I'm a little scared, because that means these guys are either not measuring the accuracy correctly, or there is a highly likability that the bots are, kind of executing certain transactions which are wrong or not correct, and they're doing in hundreds of numbers, and we're not catching it. Because typically RPA will take a little while to get to a 99, 98% accuracy level. It should throw enough exceptions in the system for humans to be able to understand what are the chances of failure, because you cannot capture everything. You can't capture all scenarios of failure modes, when you're trying to automate a bot, because then it defeats the whole cost versus ROI continuum of an RPA project. Now, if that is the case, we obviously need certain frameworks, strategies. At the same time, we also need certain complementary tools along with our bots who can do three things. Number one, they can measure human versus bot in a joint continuum, which means how do bots and humans coexist. And typically, most companies do not think about that till the time they start facing a challenge, because they believe, why invest in areas where I've not even got ROI on my RP project or my automation projects. But my recommendation would be that we should start upfront by saying we need to have a very strong bot versus human continuum governance structure together, in terms of where does a bot hand over a transaction to a human, what are the exceptions that have to be managed by humans, and how do you transfer that control back to bots, and vice versa. Because that is very important for you to run and scale up your bots, because you know where are the failure points and when will they fail. The second core component is, when you start scaling up, it's easy to manage humans when you scale up. If tomorrow a business leader says my business is growing, add 50 more humans. You have a age-year-old thought process of saying there is a hiring candidate or a team who would hire those people. Then there's going to be a training component in a company who will train those people. Then there's going to be a buddy obsession. That they will work at a reduced capacity. They will start understanding learning processes, and as they mature, their productivity will continue to automatically improve. But then there will always be a managerial layer on top who will continue to, mentor those guys and so on. So it's much easier. It's an established process. In bots, when we start deploying bots, do we have those similar kind of processes? Do we see that there is an induction team of bots? Do we create a training team of bots? Or do we create a team who is actually being a team manager managing those bots? The answer precisely to 99% organizations is no. There is going to be only an IT admin who, after the development of a bot, will just monitor those bots. And therefore, it becomes much important for us to have associated complementary tools which can help you to manage the other aspects of bot, which is about comparing how effective that bot is, how many transactions it has executed correctly, if it is failing, if a failed transaction has been reported, when was it reported, how was it reported, and so on and so forth. So, and there are tools and technologies available which can complement your bots. You can analyze the backend, codes or generated by your so-called bots, and can give you those analysis on a drop of a button. And finally, the third component is about creating a structure where your entire process can be codified into a so-called orchestrated workflow. Because humans know it very clearly. They would remember these steps, saying step one comes after step two, or step two comes after step one, and so on and so forth. The chances of a human making an error, saying that they will make a process or a transaction go wrong, is only about that they missed, or they did make a mistake, or it was a fraud. There is no third component of why a human will make a mistake. But bots can make a lot of mistakes, primarily based on when you really capture the latency of your backend application correctly. If not, it will process the transaction with the wrong data, and so on and so forth. So you need to have a orchestrated workflow and benchmarks and cross balances on your so-called worker bot with a third party or a different application or a different bot which will really audit your bot to say, is it working correctly or not? If you have these three things covered, which is scalability, quality, transaction management, and fraud management, I think then it becomes much easier for you to scale up. Your number of bots from 1 to 10 to 10 to 100, which is where most companies actually struggle to.
Thank you, Somit, on that. Brings us to our next question, which we have over here is payback for automation. Now, how to set up business intelligence to measure its performance and ROI. So, would you like to go ahead, Somit, on this?
Yeah, sure. I think this was primarily the first thing that I spoke about when we said, how do you set the vision? In the same vision component, if you do not have a structure very clearly defined of how are you going to bring that advisory business intelligence component in your whole larger automation journey in a company or an organization, then you're bound to have problems of things like non-ROI driven projects will get into your automation pipeline. And that may happen because somebody in the business higher up ladder thought this is a very important and more critical project, and I don't care about the cost versus benefit analysis here, but I just want, because it's a very critical process for my customer, it should be automated. So those are the kind of processes which will artificially enter into your pipeline of automation projects. And there are sometimes the automation leader is unable to stand up and push back those projects back to the business because there is no structure available of measuring the performance and the ROI. And therefore, it's very important that right upfront, even before we start the project, we have a very clear guideline. And that guideline should entail about 3 or 4 components. Number one, is it really a cost versus benefit analysis giving me a positive ROI in a span of even 6 to 9 months? That probably could be a first tick in the box saying, okay, makes sense for us to go forward. The second piece, is this a process which is really going to decrease my cycle time, or is it going to remain the same and I'm just removing the manual effort and converting that into an automated software? If the answer is that there is no reduction in your cycle time or time to manage a transaction, it's just about replacing a human with a bot, I would rather prioritize that process to priority 3 or priority 4, which means that this process needs a little bit of simplification before it should get into automation, because it is really not helping you reduce your cycle time. Because that's also one of the core aspects of why you would want to do automation and drive automation in your companies. The third thing is this process, Mayank mentioned that piece, is it process scalable, repeatable, and reproducible? And if the answers to all these three are yes, obviously, it's a big tick mark. If the answer to 2 out of 3 is yes, it could be still a small tick mark, and so on and so forth. What I'm trying to say is, when you create your methodology of, how do you want to measure the performance of your strategy, not just the bots, because bot management is an easier thing to do. You have data to do that. But your strategy of how you want to do automation, if you're going to measure that, and then you are going to create a structure of how you measure ROI, because ROI is not just about dollar value savings. It is about a whole lot of other things, the business value, as Mike said. If you have that right upfront, it becomes much, much easier for senior management as well as the automation team to be able to choose and also decline projects which are being pushed to them.
Yeah, Mayank, you can go ahead with that if you're with your points.
Yeah, I think Somit has really, very well captured the elements that I think would form the key of the ROI calculation, because I think that's typically what the business team would be looking at, or particularly would be needed from, if nobody else, at least the CFO would be very, very keen. I think it's needed for all the process owners, including the technology team, to see that we generate the right ROI, and it is not always going to be on how much time are we saving, right? Because all of those elements would really have to get quantified in terms of what is my opportunity cost, and that I'm going to avoid by actually automating this process. What is the error percentage in case if there was a when it was being processed from the human side, if there was a high error rate, and by automation you've been able to bring down that error rate, what is the savings that are actually getting generated? Or if you are actually able to get a transaction get completed or reduce the cycle time, as someone mentioned, significantly, and that in turn is creating a delight for your customers. Is that really translating into a positive VOC, or generating more avenues for business? So all of these elements come in, but I think typically in ROI calculation, the more tangible information really finds its place in an Excel spreadsheet basis which a business case is defined, and then there are these intangibles or difficult to quantify elements that get left behind. So I think it's a hybrid setup where both of these elements need to be considered, and not purely looking at the dollar value savings which are going to come in by actually redeploying the humans who are working on that particular process with respect to the bots that might have been brought in. I think it has to be a factor of the reduction in the cycle time, reduction in the error rate, the positive or the additional avenues that might get generated for potential of an upsell, cross-sell, or increasing the customer satisfaction. Because some of these elements finally are going to determine whether we would continue on that journey or not. And I think beyond this, and that's a very, very difficult element to kind of work with, particularly on a ROI calculation, is the organization really adopting well to that change? Because it is it's a big step. While it starts off small, but when you kind of look at an automation journey, that can really determine what your future is going to look like, and that future could be seen perhaps in 3 months' time, maybe in a couple of quarters, and maybe at times a year. How are people really adopting that change? How well are people understanding the elements that have to be considered whenever you're looking at automation, and are they able to really do their tasks better in a more efficient and an effective manner because of this automation, or life kind of continues for them as is? If the answer is the latter, then all the ROI calculations actually are going to fall flat. But if it's making a positive impact there, then I think it is generating an ROI. Even if in dollar terms it is not cleared that benchmark that might have been set for this, you could be hopeful that over a period of time that also would get cleared.
Thank you so much, Mayank, on that. And we have this another point of discussion. Do you want to add something on that, Somit?
I think what Mayank said is something which really resonates very well with most CIOs and the project owners, primarily because they are always under pressure about how do I go back and explain the success of an automation project, or the larger automation processes or projects that are going on. And it sometimes becomes difficult for people to justify it, because if there are multiple moving parts in an organization, which happens every time, the business will look at it from either from a time to market, or a improvement in the KPIs and so on and so forth, and they would come back and say, I have not seen any significant improvement or impact in terms of any changes that have happened on my process side. Versus a finance guy who would stand up and say, I'm not seeing any positive business savings that have been generated, and so on and so forth. And therefore it was essential that we have a structure in place, a measurement structure in place right up front, which takes care of finance, output KPIs, the impact on business, as well as dollar value all put together. Because a project could be giving you lesser savings through automation, but it could be helping you indirectly in saving on a huge amount of penalty that you could be paying to your consumer, or to your customers, or to the regulatory authorities, because you're not complying to the right standards. So are we capturing everything correctly into the framework and then reporting it rightly is more important. And that is where most automation projects will continue to succeed if they have chosen the right process and if we follow that structure that we spoke about. And we also are measuring the outcomes, much easier for companies to run and scale up those projects.
Yeah, which actually again brings us to our next topic of discussion, which is choosing the right automation platform and partner. Like why choosing the right automation tool and partner is instrumental in the success of the automation project now. So, Mayank, would you like to go ahead with that?
Yeah, sure. See, I think, I mean, now there are quite a few options which are available for selecting the platform for automation. I think, and likewise for the partners. I think it's important for the organization to understand what is that, what's their modus operandi going to be. If they are planning to do things at their own end, which quite a few organizations aspire for, or you are planning to kind of, have it done through the partners and let them run the shop for you, which of this is, the operating model that you would want to adopt? And basis that, you kind of see, is the platform really going to be simple enough that you would be able to, kind of manage it completely at your own end, or you would require, specialists to take care of it at all points of time. Initially, of course, it really doesn't make much of a difference because, on both of those options, there is going to be a learning curve. But I think once that part is sorted out, I think then the decision making becomes relatively simple. One should definitely carry out a POC, a hands-on POC, if possible, to see how comfortable would they be with the platform that is being selected. And typically, whenever this POC is going to be carried out, it is in all probability, or most of the times, it is going to be done along with a partner or a system integrator. And I think that's the right time to kind of also decide or actually identify those points of engagement or the terms of engagement with the partner that is with whom you are working on that POC or doing that initial implementation. See, is there a common understanding? Is there an alignment? Of course, some of the hygiene elements would be that that partner actually has executed projects of a similar kind in the past, preferably in your industry, because then they kind of bring in the domain expertise as well. They've done some of those engagements in your own geography, because that kind of gets you a closer connect. Speaking with them, not necessarily as reference checks, but speaking with some of their customers to understand what are the kind of challenges that they went through, or how was their journey working with a specific partner. At times gets you good insight that may not really emerge while you're doing that POC on your own. But all of this is going to be still hearsay. I think the proof of the pudding is going to be when you're doing that POC. What is your comfort looking like? And start small, right? If something doesn't work out, you could go for an alternate. Instead of really making it very, very big, which makes it difficult for the partner and for you to cut the cords if that's what is required. It keeps the stakes small. It also allows you to manage the internal stakeholders better in case if some of the things do not really happen as per the plan. And then I think that keeping in mind that this is still a new technology, there are not too many of those experts who are available. I mean, the partners who will be able to say that we've done this really, really well. So you gotta try it out, see what is working well for you, which of the partner is a right fit in terms of the size, scale, industry, geography, and then start on this wonderful journey.
Yeah, Somit, we would like you to share your words.
I think Mayank captured it very well. the market, while it is new, Mike was saying that we still don't have this technology running for many years, and we all know that RPA or automation has just hit the market in the last 3.5 years, and we still see almost like 30 to 40% of the companies largely imbibing them in the right fashion. So there's still a big headway in terms of how this market will mature. But one thing that has happened over the last 3-4 years is that there has been a lot of commoditization for both service providers providing automation services and the product companies who are providing the automation products. And when I say commoditization, it is basically there used to be a lot of difference and differentiation between products and service providers 3 years back, but the differentiation has come down significantly lower. So it becomes much difficult in a sense if you're trying to choose who is the right partner, both on the product and services side for me, which also becomes much easier because the risk now associated to make a decision is much lower, because most of these product companies, the top 6 at least, and the top 8 or 10 service companies, are right at the same level in terms of their maturity of understanding, automation as a market or as a potential. So therefore, what is important for people or for companies in terms of selection of the right partner as well as the product? In my sense, there are two things. If you go to the product company, almost 96 to 97% product parity has been achieved with the existing products, the top 6 products in the automation space. So what is the reason why should I choose a specific product company? I think the answer is very simply put twofold. One is, how easily and how effectively would this product be able to coexist with my existing ecosystem of my IT landscape? And that is something which is still a big differentiation point between various different products. Some products come with plug and play adapters for your existing application. Some have to be built in. Some have options of workarounds and manual work and scripts to be created. Some are not, and so on and so forth. So look at your existing IT landscape and your next 2 or 3 years horizon of IT improvements that you're going to bring in, or investments that you're going to bring in, and make a decision of which product really suits into my IT ecosystem. Otherwise, most products typically would be able to solve your business problems of automation. And the second core component is the whole demand-based, capacity-based billing model. If the product companies agreed to it, and there are product companies who would agree to it, that will give you the flexibility of using scalability of bots during your holiday seasons, during your month ends, during your quarter ends, when the volumes go up and there are small spikes, and you can actually have some flexible models being signed up with the product companies. I think these are the two reasons why and how you should select your product companies. But if you come to the other component or the other spectrum, which is the service providers, which is the services companies, again, how much can you offload the risk of automation? And I'm going to say risk of automation is not about the risk of really achieving a success, but more about the risk of achieving the outcomes that you've defined or outlined at the start of the program. How much is a service provider or a partner willing to put their skin in the game becomes a very big selection point these days, in my sense, for companies to consider and reconsider, because the competence-led differentiation really has become really low in this market. You really cannot stand up and say X service provider or X partner versus a Y partner. I could see a significant difference in experience or significant experience in competence in running my projects. It is more about, is he there at the right time at the right place? It's more about, from a future perspective, is he willing to be more flexible in terms of putting the skin in the game, one, and two, very clearly would be willing to do a kind of a capacity creation or a competence creation for my own internal teams. Is the partner willing to say that I would work with you for 2 years or 3 years, and beyond that, 30% of the staff you will train and certify at my end, because I don't want to run with a partner for my rest of my life. Once these things prioritize and they stabilize, I would have a small team of my own, really running my own programs, and so on and so forth. So it is important, but my last submission would be the lines of this being an important decision of have we selected the right product and a right partner. They are grimming down. This is becoming a less risky and a less decision-making proposition. If you go with a partner A or a B, you don't really tend to lose a significant amount of your success in your automation projects. That's my submission.
Thank you so much, Somit. I think we have almost come to covered all the topics related to this. And Mayank, if you can go ahead and conclude with your points and conclusion points.
Sure. I think it was a fairly good interaction. I think hearing from Sumit from the other side on the service provider thing. But I think for all the audience, and I think anybody who's embarking on the automation journey, I think it's a it's a great journey. But I think one needs to consider this is actually a journey. It's not really a destination. You will have to continue to you'll have to start off with small steps. You'll have to learn to walk before you can run. So as long as one bears that in mind and keeps the controls or the governance part in place, I think this is a journey which will definitely create a lot of business value and would avoid your projects to figure in the list of those failed initiatives. Um, Start with something that you have full conviction on. Have your projects coned with the business team. Um, Monitor them very, very closely. Keep your bots in check, or supervise them if the need be, like one would do for a new fledgling employee joining your team. And then there is no reason why they would not succeed.
Thank you so much, Mayank. Somit, your conclusions?
I think I'm going to sum up, by 5 bullet points, and these are the top 5 bullet points where, it's my experience of seeing where projects have failed for global organizations. And I'm going to sum up by saying if we all can take care of these 5 things right from the start, most probably you're in the right place, and your projects are going to see the day of the light. And as rightly said by Mayank, it is not a transaction; it's a ongoing process. You will continue to evolve and improve. But those 5 things in order of priorities, first, have a very strong advisory phase in terms of understanding what we want to solve, what we want to automate, how you want to automate, and have a framework of data collection as well as prioritization of your projects. The second piece is understand from that data, analyze it very crystal clear basis, and create a methodology of how you will really select and prioritize your set of projects that come to you. It should not be basis the push that comes from a department or from a senior management or from a specific area of saying, hey, this is going to help me save money or this is going to help me improve your customer experience. But it should be a framework. It could change from a company to company, from an organization to organization, but there needs to be a strategy of how you're going to prioritize your projects. The third thing is that do not treat automation as a standalone IT project. Please treat it as a project which is a combination of IT and business together, and therefore you need to have a joint governance and a joint uh, ownership-driven structure in an organization right upfront so that you don't fail. The fourth part is please ensure and take cognizance of the fact that RPA would need a strong correlation between test data and your production environment. Therefore, your test and production environments need to be a replica. If they are not, you need to be ready to take baby steps and not just look at a big bang approach. Because if you do that, your projects would fail. And finally, and we touched upon that during our session as well, is that you need to have a very strong strategy of how you will scale up from 1 to 10 to 10 to 100 bots. And do you have the right governance, right management, right bot management metrics in place? If not, please do that in the very start of your journey. And that these 5 points, in my perspective, if most organization leaders can take care of, they would have a very fruitful automation journey going forward.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you so much. I think we have not exceeded much of time, and I think we have almost covered all the topics and at the same time in the very precise time limit. Thank you, both of you, Mayank and Somit, for your time and for being the panel members over here and discussing this and enlightening us and our audiences with a lot of ideas and uh, information. I think it was more than enough, but still, we are still learning at a very learning phase. We are starting. Almost all the industries are starting, and you are there since a lot of years with a lot of experience. So your words and your knowledge is very important for everyone. Thank you so much for joining and sharing your views on this. And have a lovely day.
Thank you,
We'll be ending
Anupam.
this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, all the audience, for your time.
Thank you.